part of, okay. Part of my responsibilities. So I work in head office during the week as well, and there I'm responsible for the development of rabbis and rebbesons and recruitment, and I work very closely with Dayan Zobin as well. I mean, I've known him. It's not because he was in the year above me in school, and I've been learning from him ever since the age of 11. I've been learning from Dayan Zobin, and it's our great zechus to have him as part of our organization, part of our Besdin, and the support he gives first to this Kehillah, obviously, first and foremost the Kehillah, but to the United Synagogue and to its rabbin is extraordinary, and it's a real privilege. The story today starts. Well, the Jewish part of the story starts in 1935, but I'll give the general history of Coca-Cola in a moment. But there was a letter in Time magazine on the 13th of May 1935 titled Kosher Cola. Sirs, in connection with your interesting article on the celebration of Passover in Time magazine from the April 29th, you may be interested to know that for the first time, Atlanta Orthodox Jews were allowed to drink Coca-Cola during this solemn season. With the approval of Atlanta rabbis, special Coca-Cola bottle caps were stamped with the kosher symbol, and signs denoting the same were displayed. In soda fountains. The drink was not altered anyway. Signed Samuel Glick, Atlanta, Georgia. So clearly, there's a story behind this letter that went to Time magazine in 1935, and hopefully I'm going to unpick that story and look at the halachic. There's an interesting history, fascinating halacha, which still applies to this day. In case you're worried, Coca-Cola is kosher, just in case you don't get if I don't finish in time. Coca-Cola is kosher, but wasn't always. And let's look through that. I mean, in our lifetimes, it was all kosher. But so it was Coca-Cola was founded in 1885 in Columbus, Georgia, by John Pemberton as a cocoa wine. Later that year, when Fulton County, Georgia, passed prohibition legislation, he responded by developing a carbonated, non-alcoholic version of this wine. The beverage was named Coca-Cola because the stimulus mixed in the drink, anyone know what was in it? Okay. Was cocoa leaves from South America, the source of cocaine. Initially, each glass of Coca-Cola contained 9 milligrams of cocaine, but it was removed in 1903. As a marketing technique, the secret formula of Coca-Cola is reputed to be known by only a few Coca-Cola executives, and the original recipe resides in the vault of the SunTrust Bank in Atlanta. And then in 1935, a rabbi in Atlanta by the name of Rabbi Tobias Geffen, he wrote that an inquiry was addressed to me concerning the well-known soft drink Coca-Cola. Is it kosher for drinking during the entire year and on Pesach? And before we think about what the potential is, I'll give you a bit of background to Rabbi Geffen. He was born in 1870. The Sunday his bris was Rabbi Yitzchok Elchanan Spector, and he learnt in the Slobodka Yeshiva. And he, as a young child, he had a legendary hasmada, and it's the story, probably apocryphal. Says that when Tsar Nicholas II visited Kovna, the entire city gathered on the streets to view the spectacle. Tobias, or Tuvi as he was known, sat alone in the Beis Medrash, completely engrossed in his learning. It was very helpful because of that, he was able to allow us to drink Coke. Mm-hmm. So that's helpful. Unfortunately, due to violent anti-Semitism, his family left Kovna and moved to the United States and took a position in Atlanta in 1910, where he remained until his passing in 1970 at the age of 99. He wasn't the rabbi there till he was 99, but he retired. He lived there, and they were very hospitable, and he was renowned for his droshes and for his erudition. And so he was. Well, I'll tell you how it came about in 1935. But if you look at the source sheet, you'll see there's a magazine here called Hapardes, which is a well-known rabbinic journal. This is published in 1942, this advert, which I'm not sure how good everyone's Yiddish is, but we'll translate some of it. But this is an advert, which I just think is fantastic and well worth having a look at. And it says, Vashasiyochados, Anyone know where that is from? It's from the Megillah, referring to the drink that Achashverosh served at his Suda. Coca Cola is avadas gesund. It's for sure healthy. I'm not sure you can believe the rest of the advert after that bit.
What date was
1942, May 1942. This is after the tshuva. This is. Cocaine was moved in 1933. Oh, you mean in terms of the health? Well, when it says, yeah, there's Nishkein Besra Mashka v Coca Cola. There's no better drink than Coca Cola. Is macht frisch und mental. It makes someone feel really good about themselves. Lebendig and energetic, like lebendig and energetic. That's what Coca Cola can do for you, and the rest. But what's interesting is that the box at the bottom, this author of the magazine HaParadis, the editor, Shmuel Aaron Halevi Paradis, he says, Bismana Acharein, recently, Bikartes Beis HaCharishis Shell Coca-Cola Atlanta, Shell, Georgia. I went to the factory, Coke factory in Atlanta, Georgia. Vahema Bale Beis Charishis, Gola Lifnei Kol Ta'alumos, they revealed all the secrets. V'Taruvas Chasudai, which in brackets, these, I love responsa when they put English words in Hebrew letters. Secrets, the secret formula. Hakol Chakati Badakti, I checked everything. Coca-Cola kosher l'shtosa al pidin. It's kosher al pidin to do this, to drink it. This is 1942. But in 1935, it wasn't like that. And there were a few questions. What questions might you ask? Whether it's for during the year or for Pesach, because there was shilas about both, and the shilas about Pesach are still extant today, depending on whether you're living in America or the UK. Because although the formula, what's it called, the treacle sort of mixture they have is pretty much the same. But the bits they add around the world can be different. So actually, you mentioned Rav Landau. So the British Coke comes from Ireland, where Rabbi Landau goes to as well. He goes to that one as well. But it's for Pesach. It goes there and goes all the way to Israel and then comes to England. It's bottled in Israel, bottled in Bnei Brak. It's manufactured in Dublin and it comes back to London. So it schleps. So what shilas might there be in whether for the year or Pesach? You'd have to know the secret formula to answer that question. So I have to say that we'll have to wipe your memories when you leave the room this evening, because we're not allowed to know what's in it. But there are a number of questionable materials. The easy one is Pesach, because that's not part of the secret formula. In that, in America, they use during the year the sweetener is corn syrup. It's corn syrup which has a problem of kitnius, and in England they use sugar, not corn syrup. And so, from that perspective, there's another reason that Pesach Coke, you need to get Pesach Coke in England. But what's interesting is that I have a brother-in-law and sister-in-law who lived in Atlanta for 3 years, and they said that about 4 months before Pesach, people would come from across the United States with huge trucks, not Jewish people. They would come and stock up on their Coke for the year, because they only wanted to drink the original Coke, not the original Coke, but the Coke with natural sugar rather than with corn syrup. And so they would stock up on their Coke for the entire year. And they switch over for Pesach. They switch over Pesach, and in America you can see it has a yellow cap on it in America to show that it's Pesach Coke, and you can't buy it in California because the sugar content is too high, so it's illegal to sell that. But what you may not know is the former Prime Minister of this country, Rishi Sunak, likes his Pesach Coke. He likes the natural sugar flavour, and so every year my friend Lord Wolfson buys him a tray of Pesach Coke. There you go. I can't think of it. I hope I don't give you any more useless pieces of information this evening, and the rest of it is what it has. So it turns out, 1935, Coca-Cola Company's general counsel was a non-observant but passionate Jew named Harold Hirsch. He spent decades successfully battling imitators of the brand that was quickly becoming America's favorite refreshment, and even had a hand in designing the iconic glass bottle. But he was also a proud member of the Atlanta Jewish community, involved in various philanthropic endeavors, and had a warm relationship with the Rav of his community, Rabbi Geffen. And so, in that way, he was able to intervene on behalf of the rabbi to gain him access to be able to discuss this. And in exchange for the secret formula, he was sworn to secrecy, and you'll see in the Shuvah in a minute how he writes about that. But when he talks about two problematic areas in kashrus, he refers to them by code names. So you'll see them. He doesn't reveal them even in the response. So he refers to one. I'm just giving you this background because we'll see it in the Tshuva. He refers to one as Morris, which is a Roman era seasoning, and the other is anigron, which is a food mentioned in the Gemara, and identifies the former as a type of oil which is rendered from non-kosher beef. So it's animal fat rendered from beef. And anigron was a substance derived from grains and therefore not kosher for Pesach. We now know that is in the caramel colouring, and that's why there's actual grain in regular Coke, so you can't use it for Pesach. But the question is, what do you do with the glycerin that is in Coca-Cola, or at least was in Coca-Cola in 1935? So we know that there is glycerin. Let's say we now know there's glycerin in Coca-Cola. What question are you going to ask at that point?
Is that the animal product?
That's the animal product. So glycerin oil, which is taken from beef tallow, not kosher beef tallow. So you've got trace product in the Coke. What questions do we want to have? If you've got a drink and you know it's got something trace in it, what's the first thing you're going to? What are you going to ask about that? Sorry. So what's the percentage? Is it bottle b'shishim? Is it nullified 1 in 60? So we have a rule, and we'll see that in a moment. We have a rule that things are bottle b'shishim, they are nullified 1 in 60, but only if we have another principle of ein mevatlin islach achila. You can't do that on purpose. Question is that only if a Jew does that, or if a non-Jewish person does it? A non-Jewish person who's allowed to put glycerin in their drink, does that make a difference to us? And we'll look at some sources on that, which I think is telling on a number of levels. Yeah.
Isn't there another issue with 1 in 60 where if the ingredient is less than 1 in 60, but it's important, even though it's a very tiny amount, putting it in there because it serves a specific purpose, and you wouldn't want to do it without that, then it wouldn't be enough because it's significant for that reason.
Yes, so there's a principle of davar hama'amid, which is something that's essential for it. And then we say of davar hama'amid afilu be'elef lo bottle, it's not nullified even in 1,000. But in this case, glycerin is not that. It's not significant in that it's not crucial for that. And we'll think of some examples of that as well. Doesn't impart. We have a principle. It doesn't impart unless it's something particularly sharp. It doesn't. And glycerin doesn't impart taste. But we'll see that. But it doesn't. Of course, another drink that you may be thinking of where this question arises: whiskey. But their whiskey has a different principle. Wine has a different principle of bottle b'sheish, whether it is nullified in 6 rather than 60. And the question often arises about sherry casks. It is always better to ask that question after you've enjoyed the whiskey, and then you can't remember the answer, and you start again the following week. But I mean, obviously, lots has been written and spoken about that. That's not our topic for this evening. So Rabbi Geffen managed to convince Coke to change the formula. Not change the formula. We'll see the halachic elements. So I just want to tell you the end so we don't get carried away at 5 to 9. I realize I haven't told you the end of the story. I won't tell you how he puskined on it, but we move on. So at the company's laboratories, research scientists went to work finding a substitute for the tallow-based glycerin, and discovered that P&G, Procter & Gamble, produced a glycerin from cottonseed and coconut oil. And as soon as they agreed to used that source instead. Rabbi Geffen gave a hechsher to Coca-Cola.
The other two items were.
No, so one of them is we now know is glycerin, but he referred to it. The other thing is the Pesach question, so what they did is the Coke's chemists experimented and found that during Pesach they could substitute sweeteners produced from beet sugar and cane sugar for grain-based ones without compromising Coke's taste, and that's how we have our Pesach Coca-Cola now. So ever since 1935, possibly 1936, they've used a non-wheat based sweetener to do this. So you have the two questions. You have the kitnius thing of the corn syrup, and you have the other parts of the sweetener that are the other parts that were grain based in the caramel, and so. Well, the owner wasn't Jewish. One of the managers was one of the. The question came up in 1957 again. Let's see if I can find that before. Let's see what prints that out. In 1957, so Procter and Gamble changed their glycerin production lines from the batch processing method to a continuous flow system. You're going to be now how factories were making the kosher glycerin process on the same lines as the non-kosher animal equivalent, and due to the problem of blius of absorption, it rendered it meant that this glycerin was not kosher, and so Rabbi Liss Silva, who was the Rav of Cincinnati, for those who learned in Keren B'Yavneh, remember Rav Aaron Silva, it was his grandfather who's the Rav of Cincinnati. And he got involved again, and Procter & Gamble made a parallel production line exclusive to vegetable-based glycerin, and again ensuring that Coke was kosher. And that cost them, actually, at the time, so we're going back to 1957, it cost $30,000 at the time to change that just for the Jewish community. And I mean, lots of sources that talk about. I think since 1957, Coke. I mean, I can't vouch for Coke in the Far East. I don't know what the story is, but European and American Coke has been kosher ever since. So, but I think there are some fascinating things in the tshuva itself that I'd like to show you. But at least you've got the story now, and you can go home and have that. We're going to pick parts now. Normally, when I go through a response, I like to have line numbers printed on the side, but I could only get a PDF of this tshuva, and I couldn't get it into Word format, so I apologize for that. So we'll first look at the first few lines. This is on top of page 2. It says, Nishalti Odas Hamashka Yodur B'Shem Coca-Cola. I was asked about the drink, the well-known drink called Coca-Cola. Hanesa Po Be'irenu Atlanta, and that's, I guess, is the short form for Georgia, Gimel Aleph. Im Hamashka Anal, is this drink kasher lishtos b'chol hashana v'gam b'Pesach? Can we drink it on during the year and on Pesach? And he says, Hamashka azos achrei drisha v'chakira b'beis hacharish. After I've looked into it significantly in the factory, po be'irenu, here in our city, nodeli shamashka na'asis mitaruvos sarfei tzmochim shonim hayudim. It's made of a whole mixture of different natural ingredients. Rak lahem va'od eza taruvos mine goizlim shonim. And it's got other things mixed in as well. Asher ha'echad mehem echne b'shem Morris. One of them I'm going to give a code name or a nickname of Morris. V'hasheni echne b'shem Anigroin. And the second I'm going to call Anigroin. HaMorris hazeh hu min shuman noizli shenase mechelev. This is this first item. The Morris is a type of oil which comes from chelev, which is animal fat. Mechelev or mibasa, it comes from fat and from beef, meat. V'shuman shel balei chayim tmeos, from non-kosher anavelis, from non-kosher animals. So obviously, given the sources not kosher, this item itself is also to eat or drink. According to the owners of the factory. The amount of this Morris in the drink is at a very small percentage. It's about 1 in 1,000. So it's insignificant. And one chemist testified before me. Chemist Hamamuna Mahamlucha, who was appointed by the government. And I asked him, I gave it to him to test out the drink. So I'm not just relying on the factory owners themselves. Mikol Hatarv Nimsa, and he said he confirms it's only 1 in 1,000. Nimsha Shama Bahamaris, I said that's the amount of this Morris that's in there, which will, to make it easier, we'll call it glycerin from now onwards, because that's what it is. The glycerin in there, which is animal sourced, is treif, and the question is, what happens to the drink based on that? And he goes into this, but I want to share some important sources for this. And this starts with the Radvaz in the 1500s. And I'm going to quote him in a modern response, which is on page 4 soon. So the Radvaz in the 1500s distinguishes between a scenario, as we said, where a non-Jew nullifies non-kosher, where the Radvaz, is of the opinion that a Jew is allowed to eat of the mixture, as opposed to where a non-Jew is selling non-kosher, where he holds that forbidden for a Jew to purchase. And we'll have to understand the difference between those two things. But before I do, I want you to please turn to page 4, which is where I've printed some of the other halachic. So source 1, which is from the Shulchan Aruch, I mean, it's really source 4, whatever, but source 1, because we've got the advert and the responsum itself. Source 1 talks about the Issa Shnis Arav Beheta Min B'Sha'ena Minoi, going Cholov Shnis Arav B'Bosa, you can't, forbidden to mix sort of forbidden things that are not of the same type. So you've got cholov, so you've got a liquid with a solid. So in such a case, one would ask a non-Jewish person, or in the case of if it's truma mixed into chulin, then you would ask a Kohen to taste it, because you ask someone who's allowed to have that product. You don't tell them why you're asking, because that defeats the purpose. So with a Kohen, you can't ask him, can you taste the truma? With a non-Jewish person, you say, can't. We're not asking them if you can taste the milk in the meat. And so that's how it was once upon a time. We would rely on a person to taste it. But the Ramah says in the towards the end of that, we don't rely on that. Everything is judged. Is it 1 in 60 or less? Is the ratio 1 in 60 or not? That's how we would judge it. But that's when Issa falls into Heta. But in source 2, which is the next perek or next simon of Shulchan Aruch, Sadi Tes Sif Hey, is that this is important, as we said before. Ein mevatlin Issa lechachila, the principle, which we'll come back to, that you can't actively mix the two together, even if it's in a proportion that is lower than even if you've got 1 in 100. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do that. We have 2 important responses in sources 3 and 4. Source 3 is from the Igros Moshe, from Rav Moshe Feinstein, which we'll come back to. And source 4 is from Rav Moshe Steinbach, who is Rebbetzin Aaron to his brother, older brother, and who I discussed this question with a number of years ago. We're privileged to daven in his shul. He's the Rav of the Gra Shul in Harnof. And he writes as follows. The Shaila he's asked, this is in source 4, Ha'im mutter liknos macha magoy im hechsha. You've got a product that has a issa in it that was, let's say, 1 in 100, and it has a hechsher on it Are you allowed to buy that? Are you allowed to buy? Are you allowed to buy it? So the first question would be: are you allowed to put a hechsher on it? If it's bottled, so you're going to go through the questions. Firstly, and this is where I think this is a really interesting. I think the crux of the whole thing. So we say a non-Jewish person is obviously allowed to mix meat and milk. Fine. They are not allowed to do it for a Jewish person. You can't ask a non-Jewish person to mix it for you. They can't do it for you. What if they are making a product? So of course they are, but they're making it for the non-kosher market. Absolutely fine. No problem in them doing it. Can you buy it? That's question one. Can you buy something? So Coke that is manufactured generally for the non-kosher market, it doesn't have a hechsher on it. Can you buy it? That's question one. Now, same question, but they put a hechsher on it. Does that make it better or worse if it has a hechsher on it?
Why would you not be allowed to buy it?
Huh?
Why would you not be allowed to buy it?
If what?
Yeah, if they put something that's less than 1/60, like you just said, and if something that's not allowed, why would you buy it, and why would you not be allowed to buy it?
Okay, why would you buy it? That person might like the taste, but why would what?
Why would you not?
So if it's the question is, so if there are three, I think there are three questions. So we'll go through them and we'll go through the lomzus of them, and hopefully that will answer your question. First question is, again, we're talking about non-Jewish company. If we're talking about a Jewish company, obviously, if the person, if Coca-Cola was a Jewish company, it would not be permitted. It's a non-kosher, it's a non-Jewish company, non-Jewish owned. It's made for the non-kosher market. And so therefore the question is, so non-Jewish people can do that for the market, that's absolutely no problem. Question one, if you come along, are you allowed to buy that? Can you rely on that bittel or not? Question number one. Question number two, if you are allowed to rely on that bittel because it's made for the non-kosher market, what if it had a hechsher on it? If it's got a hechsher on it, can you still say it was made for the non-kosher market? Or because it's now got rabbinic approval on it, why did they get rabbinic approval? Because they wanted to reach the kosher market as well. And so one could argue that it's worse if it has a hechsher on it rather than if it didn't have a hechsher on it. Does everyone get that?
For exactly the same product.
For exactly the same product, better to buy it without a hechsher. One could argue, we'll see the lomdas about this in a second, I just want to introduce that. One could argue that it's better to buy it without a hechsher than to buy it with a hechsher, because once it's with a hechsher, one could argue that it's made for the kosher market. And if it's made for the kosher market, then you get back to the more severe questions of ein mevatlin issa l'chachila. So that's what we're going to look at now. That's the question Rabbi Sternbuch is asking in source 4. He says, so he starts off by quoting this Radvaz from the 1500s, not 15th, 16th century. Chelik Gimel Simon Tafkuf Mem Zayin. Svirele, he is of the opinion, Shubakinyan Gufa Shakonin Mahagoy, with the actual purchase that one does from a non-Jew, Nechshav Kamavatal Isla Chachila Va'osa Liknes. What your question? Why should it make a difference if the non-Jewish person made it beheter because they don't have an issue? What's the problem of a Jew buying it? The Radvaz argues that a Jew buying it is as if, he says, it turns it into those words. Nechshav, it's considered as kamavatal isla chachila, as though the non-Jewish person has been mevatal it for the Jewish person, va'osaliknos, and therefore is prohibited for the Jew to buy that. V'chein kosef beis Yosef sof siman kuf lamadal b'shem tshuvas Rashba. This is also the opinion of the Rashba. So that's two Rishonim who hold that this is forbidden. Sorry, it's an Achron and a Rishon. The Radvaz is an Achron, the Rashba is a Rishon. Sha'afilu vada yenem shnisarav b'she'ena minu of Yardenu oyafilu tachas yadam haya bottle buruba. Even if we've got wine, non-kosher wine, and we've got it, or you're going into tachas yodo means you're going into a pub or something to drink it. Hayol bottle baruva. There it would be bottled. Fisha zed derech mikra. There it's happened by chance, not being manufactured as a product. There, if it's happened by chance, v'choshen is over derech mikra lo hechmiru boy. Anything that happens by chance, we are not machmir for. Ad shahoya nun test, as long as you don't have less than 1 in 60, nun test being 59, as long as you've got the right ratios. Aval kol shedarcha lasos came, but if this is the way of doing it, it becomes a product. This is the way they do it every time they sell this drink. Kain osuva ain't a bottle b'miota. It no longer becomes bottle. And then he moves on. So the view of the Radvaz and the Rashba is that once you try and buy something that relies on bittul, and it doesn't just happen by chance, they are manufacturing this each and every time by relying on bittul. Obviously, that's not in the minds of the manufacturer, but as far as we can say, this is not derech mikra, and therefore, when you buy it, that's nechshav k'mavatal issa lechatchila.
Wine may be different, no?
Wine has different ratios.
It's got different.
Different ratios. Sorry, you're.
Wine, not treated as much more politics sometimes than Coca-Cola, etc. And he's talking about wine.
So he quotes who was he quoting? He was quoting, this is the Rashba. The Radvaz is talking about anything, and then he quotes Rav Moshe quotes the Rashba who's talking specifically about wine. Correct. However, if you look 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, fifth line down, a third in, it says Va'ayim Baramo. So that's the view of the Radvaz, the Beis Yosef, and the Rashba. But Va'ayim Baramo, Shechelek, the Rama argues. So this is the Ashkenazi opinion. We argue. Posik de mutter liknois sheich or mashka. You can a sheltavash. You could buy beer or mead. Mehanochrim afim darkanitem besocho shmorim shel yain. Even if they've poured some wine in it, it's permitted to buy it. Im yesh shishim keneged hashmorim. As long as you have the right ratio. The Ramah is not worried about this, and he allows one to buy something that has that relies on bittul. And then he goes on to say, and comes to your point about the wine. At the end of the line, v'yesh lechalik to dafka b'stam yenam to rabbanon. Perhaps this is only true with wine, which is rabbinic in nature. The prohibition is rabbinic in nature. Aval be'isa doraisa. Shemari had Radvaz, but in a biblical prohibition, Torah prohibition, which the Radvaz is referring to, Yesh Lema to Osaliknos. One could say that one cannot buy it. So it's the other way around. And we rely on this, by the way, when it comes to whiskey. So we are quite makel when it comes to whiskey. But the Achronim actually makel on this like the Ramah and say, if you have the opportunity to buy something, a product that is not by chance, but this is manufactured in this way, it relies on bittul, it is fine to do so. That's the opinion of the Ramah, and the Achronim, says Ramosha Sternbach, are making on this. Huh? This is an Ashkenazi posting.
Is that even when it has hechsher?
Wait, we haven't got to the hechsher part. Let's see what he says about the hechsher part, and then we'll finish by going back to Rabbi Geffen to see. He has some lovely lines in it. It's just, you see, one of the great things you can see through Responsa is you learn about what life was like in the city at the time. So talk about tragic times as well. There's an amazing responsum of the 3-day Eish, which perhaps I'll quote on the third one. The 3-day Eish with Chil Yaakov Weinberg, who was the Rav of Berlin in the 1930s, where he's asked the question where the Nazis in Machshamam wanted to say you had to priest on animals before shechita, and they added other criteria in as well. And you see him sitting on this question and laying out the options. He's saying, firstly, we're living in a city where most people are, if I don't allow this, will happily eat non-kosher meat. So I've got to think about it this way. And the other one, you're giving in to the Nazi rulers, and who knows what's going to come next. And you see him writing in 1933, and it's around the time, within a month after the Nazis get elected to government, where it's just you see the timings of tshuvas, lots of tshuvas through history. So you see this as well. You get an insight into 1935 Southern America. We'll come back to that. This is probably 1980s South Africa where this tshuva was written. Omnom, so the second of the three paragraphs in this tshuva. Omnom nira she'ein lahaskim sh'rabbanon ya'aniku hechsha al smach bittel. It's fine to buy it if it doesn't have a hechsha, but it's not a good idea. We shouldn't agree to allowing rabbanon to put a hechsha on it. So because once it's being manufactured with a hechsha, one could argue that it's now being manufactured for Jews, in which case it should be osa. V'haramah, and the kula of the ramah, this is when it's being manufactured for the general market, and that's fine. It's not. There's no problem of ein mevatel issa l'chachila. V'chein mavur b'shut haradvaz dehakas of zelashayne v'davar yudur shehu she'osa davar b'shas l'kemekom ki'ilu mevatel l'chachila. That's what he's saying when you. That's what he's now arguing is what the Radvaz is saying. We have to see whether we agree with that. The Radvaz, it's not clear that that's what the Radvaz is saying. This is what he argues that he's saying, that when you purchase it, he's saying the Radvaz might be talking about a case where he's selling it to you because he wants you to have it. So obviously not talking about mass, in the 1500s, we're not talking about mass-produced articles. We're talking about probably a small baker or a small whatever, and you're going to buy it then. So you can argue that. In Cain, Yeshvash Dehainish Yudu Kasha Kadate Limko Israel does have a I think he wants to make shalom. He wants to say the Radvaz, who said it's asa for a Jew to buy a product that relies on bihel. He's arguing that the Radvaz is agreeing with this principle, or he's saying that this is like it's got a hechsher on it because he's selling it specifically. Again, not a mass-produced article. It's made in a home, sold to a Jew. The last paragraph, if someone buys from the market a kvanis battle and its bittul has already taken place. There is no problem, there's no issa even to buy it. But when one buys it with a hechsha, and you're relying on bittul, since it's now being mixed on behalf of Jews, that this is worse and it's osa. And from this, we have an amazing lesson to learn. Sometimes when a hechsha is not a top hechsha, and they're relying on various colors, it would have been better not to have a hechsha on at all. If we said it makes it worse with a hechsha than without. So at least now, one thing, at your Shabbos tables, you can ask the question, give me a case where it's worse to have a hechsha than not to have a hechsha. Huh? No, clear. Yeah. Clearly, Coke now doesn't rely on this because the ingredients were changed. The ingredients were changed so that there are no non-kosher products in it. We have problems for Pesach, and we have to work that out. And so there is different things done for Pesach. Honestly, there are a couple of lovely lines in this. He says. So if you look on page 3, please, so you'll see at the end of the first paragraph, you see every so often the words Coca-Cola light up with those speech marks. You see he quotes the Rashba, and the Ravad has the same view as the Rashba. It says Uvavor Zeh in the second paragraph, the short paragraph. It's the bit in the third paragraph I want to get to, but this is it's difficult for me to permit it. Definitely on Pesach is a problem. Because of chametz, to osa b'mashu is forbidden. Even 1 in 1,000 chametz is osa. To vada osa lishtos mashkin hazos b'Pesach. Fine. Aval kasher. No. However, now, since the moment I'm standing in or sitting in 1935, this drink has spread across our whole country, over Canada, and even in Canada. You see that? It's going to be impossible to ban it. So he's actually siding with the Radvaz halachically and the Raavad to say that even though it's permitted for a non-Jewish person to mix the two together, you can't buy it. That's his view, unlike what we saw in the Ramah or Moshe Shtabach, but that's his view. But he said, but I've got a problem. I want to usher it, but I can't because no one's going to listen to me. Therefore, Hishtadalti, I tried limtze eza heta lahata hamashkana. I tried to find a heta to allow this. Over eza Hashem yisbarach matzasi heta novoin va'amiti, and with the help of Hashem, I found a true and good heta. She'ein boi shum chashash v'nidnud shel eza tarav v'sisakla. There has no doubts about it at all. Ki kasher noideli mehamumchim. Because once it became apparent to me, or the mumchim, the experts, habakim, hamumchim and habakim, both words mean experts. Ha'oskim b'chochmas, ha'harchava v'hafrada. And in brackets, that's chemia balaz, chemistry. This is chemistry. So I spoke to some experts who are expert chemists. You can also prepare glycerin in a completely natural way without using animal-based. Kamoi, this is, see, everyone gets this? Cocoa nuts. So you can get it from cocoa nuts. V'shemen, I'm not quite sure, it's two words though, that's what threw me. V'shemen shel zaroni cotton, and from cotton seed. V'shad tzmachim, and other vegetables. For sure that's kosher. Obviously, there's no question at all. And then he says, and he says the same thing. We can come to a conclusion. So we can now go to, still in that paragraph, the second bottom line, 4 words in, where the full stop is, and based on my advice, in the above mentioned factory, they started to use only natural glycerin. And then then if you now turn to if you continue now on the second line of the next paragraph, where the full stop is in the middle. Now, therefore, now yuchlu lachnos alishtos mehamashke Coca Cola af hamahadrin biyosa. So Coca-Cola, not only is it kosher, but it's super mahadrin there. B'chol yimei Hashem the whole year. V'gam b'chag Pesach. V'oiden, I want to thank Lashem Yisbarach Laki also b'yadi l'sakin tikkun gadol b'zeh, that I was able to fix this. V'lis kois es harabim la'tzila melachshel b'isat haravas shal chelev hachomo ba'onish kares chas v'shon. And I was able to save everyone from transgressing this grave sin, and from chametz on Pesach. Until now you're eating in Issa, now you can eat it in Heta. So he was very proud of himself. I mean, not proud of himself, but was very pleased to be able to save everybody from that. Now,
it was mentioned, of course, that it was influenced to change the ingredients. I mean, the product itself, you would postulate, but it's only because you could get ingredients changed. I mean, that's not a trivial matter
yes.
for most people.
Yes, no, you can't always go to the fan manufacturers and say, but the big issue here is how he would have paskined, how had they not changed it. And I think based on what we said from Rav Moshe Steinbach, one could have time to look at the Igros Moshe quickly, that one paragraph of Rav Moshe Feinstein, which was source 3. That's what's claimed. And we have that quote from the person who worked in the factory. I mean, I know examples of this. So, for example, I knew when I first came to Highgate, I had he's still a member of them, he doesn't work for them anymore. Someone was the chief chemist in Tate & Lyle. So he told me that a few years before, Tate & Lyle changed their product lines so that because the lines were getting mixed up with other things, and so the sugar was definitely problematic on Pesach, and arguably, I can't remember now whether it was all year. So they started a new run. So regular Tate and Lyle sugar is kosher for Pesach all year. So now you see in the London business, you don't need to buy Tate and Lyle sugar with a hechsher for Pesach, because they changed it for the Jewish community. They changed their product, the way they do their product, 17, 18, maybe 20 years ago, because they huh? Oh, he's wrong. We have lots of They did change it, and I never got my tour of the factory, but that's a big change, and we're very grateful for that. It means sugar's much cheaper on Pesach because it's the same price as all year, and there's certain projects that are. So let's finish with the Igros Moshe, Rav Moshe Feinstein, writing in source. So this is just Rav Moshe's tshuvas are often very long, so I just chose the relevant paragraph for us here. It's another one of these great Hebrew words. Ve'im hamargarina. So I think we can all translate that. Im hamargarina hu shel Yisrael shehu osa la'asas b'chli ha'ak. So here we're talking about manufacturing things in non-kosher. So there's no non-kosher products. You're talking about manufacturing something kosher in a non-kosher pot. This is the scenario, and there's a difference between something as a ben yoma, whether it's within 24 hours of being used for something treif, and something post 24 hours of it being used. Ve'imam adrina hu shal Yisrael, shehu asa la asos b'chli ha'akum, and a Jewish person is forbidden to manufacture it in a non-kosher kli, after ein b'nei yom, even if it hadn't been used for the last 24 hours. Asa lahamid shal mashkiach. You can't put a hechsher on the product without koshering the pot. It's inappropriate. Even though, according to most poskim, if you have cooked something kosher in a non-kosher pot, but that non-kosher pot has not been used for over 24 hours, it doesn't affect what you've cooked. So here he says this is problematic though. So also such lifnei aniyastati ligrom lo sheyasa iso bishul b'kelim she'enim bnei yomen ha'asurim. Hold on a second. Also, I'm just going over there. After post Kimshleka is Amash Nisbatel, Nisbashal, also Mitzad Lifnei Iver. Sorry, Lifnei Iver, because you're causing someone to do things by allowing this. You would allow people. We're going to go 1 minute. So let's. Okay, fine. Let's go to where the full stop is in line 3, and let's see his summary, because that's the. Bahamargarina shall akum should be able to, if the margarine was made by a non-Jewish person. This is the comparison. This is a similar case to our other one. There's a difference between a Jewish person manufacturing the margarine and a non-Jewish person doing it. Bahamargarina shall akum should be arti she'im hu himtzi la'asas margarina hechshera shekosha af b'lo hagala. The question is whether he can do it without hagala, without koshering the pot. Im einam b'nei yomen, if the pots haven't been used 24 hours for something treif. If they had, that's definitely forbidden. And it's definitely clean. There's no issa in it, but it's not the right thing. This is not the right thing to be doing. To put a hechsher on something that relies on it's kosher, you shouldn't have a hechsher. That's what Rav Moshe Feinstein's view is. To give it hashgacha. Avla kol ponim yesh lismach ala gala she'osim b'shvil min akrusa l'tovas haroischim emas onesh hamalchus im gam heim oisin b'roischim. What you could do, rely on, if they clean the vessels, the pots, for health and safety reasons in very hot water, that you can rely on. Once they've done that, you can rely, because the product is kosher anyway. You can rely on that, and then fine for you to give a hechsher. So he's writing to a kashrut agency and telling them what they can do. So sometimes a hechsher is not appropriate, and it's better to eat it by a hechsher. Sometimes a hechsher makes it worse, and sometimes you can have popular products on the shelves that have an incredible history that you won't have known about. So the efforts of Rabbi Tuvia Geffen in 1935 and Rabbi Liss Silver in 1957 have ensured that you can drink kosher cola. And another time, next time you meet Rabbi Jerry Conway, he can tell you about how the Coca-Cola factory in Dublin turned everything over to is as if like they're cushering their kitchen for Pesach 3 months beforehand to make the Pesach. And he said that's he can tell you about that. But that's
So that means that the kasher scale where it says it hasn't got diabetes in front, it's pretty better than it does.
yeah, it depends what it's relying on. It depends what it's relying on, and you need to know each product. But that's yeah.
It made any difference if they instead of the vegetables derived from that they're using kosher animals to derive that glycerin. What would that have done to the status of the Coca-Cola?
So if it was kosher sourced glycerin,
Kosher from a meat product,
it would be kosher.
be meaty, be that far.
It wouldn't be meaty. Oh, sorry, would it be meaty 1 in 6? No, it wouldn't be meaty. And this I think so. I had suggested one of the topics just Stein's open, but he said he's spoken about it recently. Was about these lab-grown beef burgers, whether they're going to be meaty or parve and this and the other. Have a look at that. I remember when I gave a show on it a few years ago, and I asked Angeli beforehand for his view on it, and he said there's a general principle we learned from the Noda B'Yehuda not to paskin on something until it's a live issue. And he said for 2 reasons. Number one, things change between science fiction and reality. And number 2, he said that according to Noda B'Yehuda, you have a certain siyata d'shmaya to paskin on something when it's a real shalom. A week later, there was a news item how until that point all lab-grown burgers were being the medium that was in the petri dish was blood, and they changed it to a natural product, so a natural medium, and so that immediately the shiloh changed. So I showed that to Stein Gelly. There we go. So yes, that's going to be. Have a look at that. I think it is. I think there, even if it's, I think they're